Okay guys, let's now have a look at authentic leadership from a CEO's point of view. These are guys and girls that have reached the top of their field, they have a lot of influence, they certainly command a lot of people. So what do they think about authentic leadership? We've spoken to two, Brian Blake, the long-standing Managing Director of DB Breweries, and Peter Miller, the Managing Director of Tomkin and Taylor. Let's start by having a look at what Brian had to say on the topic.
I think it's starting with someone who genuinely wants to add value to an organisation, and particularly through the people in that organisation. So first and foremost, they're there to do a job in a way that is not self-serving, not political, but basically in a holistic way have a vision for that organisation and want to realise that vision and realise that vision through its people. And when you talk about authentic leadership, then it's coming back to, you know, the sort of values we talk about in terms of, you know, having high ethical standards. You know, it's not about exploiting the people in the organisation. It's about setting standards and having high values, and working through those people in a way that you develop a tremendous amount of trust with your people. You know, and I think a lot of that relates to openness and communication and style. It relates to walking the talk as well as talking the talk. I think you get a lot of leaders that talk a lot about what they're going to do, but at the end of the day, you know, your people will judge you on your own behaviours, which reflect your own values, and hopefully they're totally consistent with the organisation's values. So I think at the end of the day, you know, how would you sum that up? Well, you'd want your people to say, shit, he's a bloody good leader, he's a bloody good bloke, you know, we trust him, you know, we think he has the right vision for the company and we're prepared to, you know, follow him. So it's sort of all wound up together, and part of that from a leadership point of view, I think, is, you know, and I know we talk about a lot on the Hillary program, is this whole thing about self-awareness, because you probably need to feel comfortable in your own shoes and understand your own limitations and your own personal values and ethics before you can then take those into an organisation and lead the organisation. So I think if you're unsure of yourself in that respect, then that will translate into a high degree of uncertainty in the organisation.
So there's Brian Blake's point of view on what authentic leadership's all about. Peter articulated it as really believing in and being able to project the values of your organisation, working in a collaborative way towards common goals, and really being true to yourself, because otherwise people will see through you. Now let's turn to great examples of authentic leaders. John Key came up a number of times. Both managing directors said that he'd got off to a great start, but now they were looking to him to really follow through on what he'd promised. Likewise, Barack Obama, great orator, certainly seems to have got the world behind him. Now he needs to really come through and deliver on the things that he's promised. Turning to the more commercial side of things, Brian held up Rob Fyfe of Air New Zealand as being a very authentic leader, and in particular the way that he's handled the recent crash where tragically a number of Air New Zealand staff were killed, and that he's actually travelled to Europe with the families and really lived through that and shown a little bit of himself as he has gone through that experience. Let's now have a look at a couple of Brian's comments on those people.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, because I think if you look at the two big, from a New Zealand point of view, not from a world point of view, but you've got John Key coming into his position and you've got Barack Obama coming into his position, and certainly both prior to being elected talk the talk, and you got the sense with both of them that they saw their roles as a opportunity to make a significant change that was both good for the USA and good for New Zealand. John Key has been in power, so we can probably look at him a little bit closer, but he's been quite impressive, hasn't he, in that, you know, he hasn't just talked the talk, he's walked the talk as well. And if you actually look at him, he's not actually rooted in any political ideology. I mean, he happens to sit in the National Party, but that's why, because he genuinely wants to make a contribution to New Zealand. And he doesn't have a strong right-wing view or a strong left-wing view. He sort of sits in the middle there somewhere. And whatever he thinks is best, I suspect, whether it's left or right, he will do what he thinks is best for New Zealand.
Yes.
So I think we're going to see quite an interesting situation in New Zealand. It's not a leader that's not driven by a strong political philosophy, but by a genuine desire to actually take this country to the next stage, you know.
Yeah.
So watch John Key, because I think, he's moved quickly already, and you're already hearing very positive comments about, you know, things he promised to do and he's already done them. So that's, you know, his credibility is improving very, very quickly. So I would say watch the space on him.
Okay.
The other one you mentioned me actually just before was Rob Fife, and he's another guy that I was lucky enough to be involved with an interview with him a couple of years ago with Paul Holmes, and it was the first time I met him.
Yeah.
And I was quite impressed with the guy at the time. So having had a personal connection with him, I've actually tracked his career quite closely, because we think brewing's a pretty competitive industry. The international airline, you know, industry is really just cutthroat, and I think that company could have easily gone under. And he's made some really hard calls, you know, over the last couple of years. The stories of him he gets amongst his people, he spends a lot of time communicating with his people. I think there's a real degree of trust from his people in terms of what he's done. And I think with this recent crash of this aircraft off the coast of France, you know, he's shown the human side to his leadership as well, and the fact that he obviously spent a lot of time with the families. He flew to France with them. You know, that engenders a lot of confidence. So, you know, you would say that he's shown all the signs of being a truly authentic leader.
Yeah.
He spoke about authentic leaders and who really embodied it well. He spoke very much about listening more and coaching rather than giving people a solution. Looking for constructive feedback about his own style, and focusing on the areas that you actually can make an impact on, and not beating yourself up too much about the things that are outside of your control. Brian summed it up very much around focusing on openness and genuineness. So, as Brian's the only one that we've got on tape, let's have a couple more comments from Brian.
I think the danger that we all fall into, and it's probably even worse now with the economic conditions that we have, is that, you know, so many leaders are under so much pressure to deliver results, you know, in the short term, medium and long term, that the whole focus becomes very, very earnings oriented. But at the end of the day, and we know that in DB, that, you know, really what produces sustainable profitability over the long term is having really, really good people and developing them and having really, really good brands. So I think a lot of potential leaders in New Zealand need to focus more on the people side of the business. I just don't think there's enough attention given to that. I think generally people underestimate the impact they can have on the organisation when they spend time on their people, developing their people, creating trust with their people. Because I always work on this theory that, and once again I'll use DB as an example, we have 530 odd people at DB. The performance of this company depends upon how aligned those people are to the company's vision, and the person that really is the glue. But if you cannot get the aspirations of those individuals and their own personal goals aligned to the organisation goals, then maybe you can move the performance of the organisation in terms of a sort of average commitment of 70% to an average commitment of 90%. Now that translates into performance. That's when good companies become great companies. Because when you have, you know, your employees passionate and committed because they understand the vision, they can align themselves with the vision, the values and the strategies, and at the end of the day they trust the guy that's at the top who's leading the organisation. Basically being a bloody good person, you know. It's about having high values and high ethics and behaving in such a way. You know, it's the whole thing about the way you'd like people to treat you is the way you should treat the rest of the organisation. So some of the stuff's reasonably basic, and maybe a lot of people overcomplicate it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So there we have it, guys. Let's sort of just try and sum up what our two chief execs have to say. They felt it was very much around having a genuine desire to achieve things through people, being true to yourself and consistent at all times. You can't sort of flip-flop in this game, and having very high ethical standards throughout your tenure.